Hey guys, welcome into another episode of 410 Sports Talk. I'm James Haskell, along with my co-host Glenn Martin, and our friend of the show, our favorite guest, most likely, Joshua Harris, Lamar Jackson's personal quarterback coach, guy he works out with in the summer, known for a long time. Really excited to have him on. So Josh, thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks, and man, thanks for making me feel good. Telling me I'm your favorite guest.
Yeah, absolutely. I realized after I said, I was like, you know what? I can only speak for myself. I'm sure Glenn has the same opinion. We're usually pretty lined up on these things, but I better not go too far out on a limb and save both of us. So there's one thing I want to talk about off the top. A lot of the questions we're going to ask you today are a lot of things that we've heard. Some of them we put more stock in than others. Naturally, as you can imagine, because Lamar has become a victim of his success, some of them aren't the most positive questions at this point. I feel like Glenn and I talked about this, and he's really the only quarterback that we've seen that's not allowed to have an off game, apparently, or else he gets hyper criticized from everybody from Stephen A. Smith to any beat writer in Alaska. But before we get into them, one of the things I want to ask you off the top, are people overall overreacting about, Lamar's season thus far, 6 weeks into the 2020-2021 season?
Yes. Yes. I'm sure you want me to elaborate, but I just want to make sure the record's clear. Yes.
Yeah, please.
But yeah, and I pretty much assume that would be the line of questioning. My thought on that is, and I'll use, because I think this has been the common comparison lately. Look at Patrick Mahomes last year, right? Now, remember, he had a little injury in there, but go look at the numbers. Remember his second year, first year really starting, he threw 50 touchdown passes. Came back the following year, I think he threw 20-something. The stats were different. And I think everybody needs to understand that it's just the ebb and flow of life and careers and how it works in the National Football League and just sports in general. We see this, I knew, and I think already I knew the stats weren't going to be the same. The stats were going to be different. And so my eyes haven't even been looking at the stats this year. I honestly don't even know what he's been doing statistically. Of course, week to week I look, but I already came into this season knowing stats. I mean, he broke a record last year. You know what I mean? He done something nobody had ever done. You're probably only going down from there immediately, So right. Yes, it's an overreaction. At the end of the day, guys, fans, I would say this: remember what it's all about. Team wins and losses, 5-1. Mm-hmm. He's been a winner since the day he's put on the jersey.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And you mentioned before when we had you on before the season started that it's certainly possible and probably likely that Lamar will play better while having a dip in his statistics. So I guess that's just what we're seeing then. We're seeing that dip in statistics, but are you seeing that he's playing the position of quarterback better than he was last season?
I do. I think and it's one of those things where I can see he's seeing some things that he hadn't seen in previous years. And I think that's just the maturity of the position. I think we're running into now he can be seeing that, and then there could be nowhere to go because the defense is covering it. You know what I mean? But honestly, in his progression as a quarterback, one of the main things the focus was on was your hot read and your sight adjustment. Basically, hey, if something's in your face, where can I dump it off? Or on the backside, sight adjustment, where can I dump it off? And he missed some of those last year. And I'm seeing him reading that more this year. I will say that I think you're seeing defensively, people are throwing some different coverages at the Ravens. And some of them have been a little bit more effective. Guys haven't been as open. Guys are starting to key in on some of the tendencies that the Ravens offense has had over last year. So I think we're seeing some of the some of the tight window throws. Some of the throws are having to be in tight windows. Some of them are incompletions being batted down because the coverage is there. And so you're maybe seeing that, and people are like, oh, Lamar doesn't know where to go with the ball. No, he knows where to go. It's just the coverages now, they're kind of figuring out the scheme.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I think a lot of people were interested to see this year was the impact Lamar would have in the run game. I think, of course, something that makes him so dynamic is, people forget, like you talked about, it seemed like he was breaking a record every week, doing things that no one had ever done every single week. We had on the NFL.com, they have an insights tab at the end of every game, and it was full. You had to keep scrolling because every single time there was a new record. So particularly in the run game, he broke the record, Michael Vick's record for most rushing yards in a season. And one of the things that we talked about was his impact, what it was going to be this year. And he talked about having, it seemed to me like he was talking about being more precise, where he was going to have, less carries, but more long ones. He's going to strike less, but more efficiently. Right. Mm-hmm. Now, it doesn't seem to me, that's happening this year, but one of the things that I know people don't want him to do is they don't want him to run as much, but I think we're going to need him this year based on our regressed offensive line play. How do you see Lamar's rushing attack? How do you see that balance working out this year? How will he have to play in order, to make the team effective? And what are your feelings on it?
Yeah, great question. And first of all, let me say great insight that I forgot to mention. Probably the biggest thing is, and I think I talked about this a little earlier, like the loss of Marshall Yanda in that offensive line is huge. I think a lot of times the casual fan doesn't understand how important the offensive line is and how intricate it is when you have an interior lineman who can get one guy and then get another guy, and come off that block and get it, and what it opens up in the run game. And so, yes, you're seeing some of that, diminished firepower in the offensive attack because there's some key pieces missing. I would say this with Marshall Yanda leaving. Imagine if Lamar left the offense. He was that impactful on that line. So now to your question, let's look at last week. He had 8 yards, but it was only on 9 carries. If you think back to last year and the previous year, he was getting 100 yards, but it was on 17 carries, which if you look historically, quarterbacks didn't do that. And so you're seeing a more precise, he had bigger runs last week. And then you've also seen games this year where he hasn't run much at all. And like you said, you're kind of in a catch-22 because fans want to see, hey, we want to see the offense of last year, which, again, was historical running the football, never been done before. You want to see that again, and then you're like, Lamar, do it for us. Well, that's not realistic. I think the best thing that we're seeing is you're winning games, he's not running the ball, and the offense ain't that efficient because it can get better, right? It can get better. So I think like you saw last week, 9 carries, maybe that 6 to 8 range, and you can get 50 to maybe 100 yards off of that. I think that's the sweet spot, and then we kind of develop that passing game and get it to where it's hitting on all cylinders with multiple receivers. I think that's the sweet spot for the Baltimore offense. But I think fans got to get out of, you saw historic last year, and that takes the perfect storm of circumstances to get that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up Marshall because I think the trust or maybe lack of trust in the offensive line protecting him could be affecting some of the errant throws from Lamar. And so I wanted to get your opinion on that, specifically the interior, because I think the tackles we are kind of getting what we expected from them when healthy. Of course, Stanley did miss the one game. But can you talk about how disruptive interior pass rush can be, and not just pass rush, but also run, when they bring those run blitzes up the middle, how disruptive the interior pass rush can be to not just Lamar, but the whole offense?
Yeah, the interior pass rush is the most disruptive type of pass rush, and think about it in life. It's the nearest point, right? That is where the ball is. So usually when you're trying to scheme up your blocking schemes, you want to shore up the interior because the further outside the pass rush, the more time for the quarterback. So like you're saying, if we're having holes in the interior, that's going to make the quarterback more, and I'm not saying he's this, but more antsy, right? Because that's that pressure right up in your face. As soon as you get the ball, it's already in your line of sight. So that's the most disruptive pass rush. And figuring out this interior line, that's huge. And even in the run game, because again, That is where the ball is. The ball is in the interior. As soon as it's hiked, if any type of pressure or rush gets in there, it stops the running back from the depth that he has, where he's trying to look in his eyesight to find which lane he's going and so forth. So it's the epicenter of the play. So if a defense can get a decent pushback in the interior, it messes up everything from the beginning. And so when that starts happening, human nature is to start kind of checking to make sure you got a little time to run the ball and throw the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. There is one thing that, like I said, some things we put stock in, other things not put much stock in it. But one of the things I have noticed, I have observed, one of the things that resonated with me was when Lamar scored that touchdown, that rushing touchdown against the Eagles. He threw the ball really hard against the pad right there at the, the lower end of the ball. He seemed like he was getting something off his chest. He's like, a little bit of frustration mounting in the offense there. He's getting in the end zone. He's like, all right, we're in. Like, let's move on. We got 7. We're doing our job, right? Mm-hmm. But one of the things that I feel like is different in comparison to last year is I feel like last year he was having, it seemed like there's a little more smiles, a little more fun, a little more looseness, where I think right now, once again, just my observation, I feel like he's playing a little more tight, having a little less fun. How important is it for Lamar to have fun out there while he's playing? And do you agree with that? Is that something you've noticed as well?
Yeah, it's very important for Lamar to have fun and to be loose. And like you said, last year you saw it a lot because they were blowouts. You know what I mean? And don't forget, there was a 12-game winning streak.
Yeah.
Again, that's unheard of. Like,
right.
I think a lot of people don't forget how unheard of last year was. 12-game winning streak.
Right.
So yes, and Lamar is a competitor. I mean, he's the ultimate competitor. And so, yeah, I mean, anybody can see that the offense isn't doing what it was doing. And of course that frustrates him a little bit. So I'm sure there was a little bit of catharsis, when he, hey, we're getting in there, letting that emotion out, because when you had what you had last year, you want to replicate that every game. And it hasn't been as easy as it was last season. And to your other point about your assessment, yeah, I think there's a bit of even where I've been looking now to see, do I see him comfortable? You know what I mean? Do I see him loose? Because I have seen sometimes in a few, I can't remember the exact games, but there's been a couple games where I'm like, yeah, something's not, it's not in sync like it is, because I can tell he's not loose. And I'll say this about him. He's, like I said, he's a competitor. So if he's not going down the field every drive, it's going to start to bother him, and he's going to start to want to make a play. And I think that's what I was saying to people about. That's the ebb and flow and the maturity of a player. Like, he's a young man who's had tons of success and he's uber talented. And now he, as a man, has to go through, hey, bro, it ain't going to be like it was last year. Like, he has to learn that. You know what I mean? As a quarterback, if you think about a Tom Brady didn't panic when the Bucks kind of went down. You know what I mean? Even think of last year, people said Aaron Rodgers had a down year, right? He didn't panic or not. He did his thing, came back this year, and now he's been lights out. His last game wasn't that great, but so that's what Lamar is going through as a man, as a player. You had all of this stuff. It may have even came, I won't say easy, but it, everything lined up. Well, now he has to mature and go through this where everything's not going like it went last year.
Yeah, and that leads me into my next question. I'm glad you mentioned his youth, because I think that oftentimes still gets lost on the average fan. And I don't think many still realize that he's younger than Joe Burrow. I mean, so, and we give Joe Burrow a lot of leniency being a rookie. So, like, how we haven't seen Lamar's ceiling yet. So I guess that's just, I just wanted to kind of highlight the point that you're making, that he's learning all this as he goes. You mentioned that he has to learn to accept that maybe he's not going to match last year's insane totals, and he's still growing as a quarterback. So at 23 years old, I mean, he's not even close to his prime yet. So am I right in saying that we have no idea how high his ceiling is?
You're absolutely correct. To your point, him, Joe Burrow, and Kyler Murray were in the same high school class.
Wow.
Yeah, right. Like, it blows my mind, right? Like, yeah, they were in the same high school class. All right.
Oh my gosh.
And so he's a baby, you know what I mean? And like you said, to see what he did last year, his ceiling is the sky. Like, there's no limit, literally. And this is a part of the process. And I think, as fans, of course, short for fanatic, we kind of want it to be like Madden. Hey, he's got a 96 rating. So every time I put him in, I'm going to get 6 touchdowns. You know what I mean? But we've got to understand that him as a person and as a human being, think about in our lives. Before we grow, there's got to be some type of adversity and setback. And so, honestly, we should be kind of excited that he's going through this now and 5-1.
Right.
Like, this ain't adversity, and we thought the Ravens were going to be good, and they're 2-4. Right. This is adversity in 5-1.
Right.
And the one loss is to the Super Bowl champs.
Right. No, I'm with you 100% there because, last year we were 2-4. I mean, we were 4-2 at this point. We're 5-1 at this point. Look, I'll take it. I agree with you. If our previous strongest point of this team, being the offense, is now struggling a little bit and we're still 5-1, that gives me a lot of hope right now. If it were something that we can't improve upon, okay, I'm a little bit more scared. But yeah, I agree with you both. And one of the things that I draw a lot of hope off of, I mentioned this to Glenn, is that like I feel like a lot of the guys that came in the league with him, you look at like a Baker Mayfield, a Josh Allen, a Josh Rosen, Sam Darnold. Sam is younger. Sam Darnold is on the younger and he's closer to Lamar. I think he's a little older than Lamar, but either way, I think those other guys, they were JUCO transfers or transfers in and of itself. They are more of a finished product to me when they come in. Not that they're not going to progress, but Lamar is still getting newbie gains, right? Like he's just hitting it like exponentially. He's going to grow. So I agree with you there. But one of the things I want to talk to you about is Coach Urban said that during a bye week, practice is more similar to training camp or OTA practices since they don't have the need to prepare for an opponent. He said the Ravens can spend time working on themselves in terms of rhythm and timing in the passing game. How much improvement can be made in a week in which they only focus on themselves and getting the offense, getting better as an offense instead of focusing on an opponent?
I think it can get better exponentially. And I think that's the other thing that people are forgetting. Let's not forget this offseason. This was not a typical offseason.
Right.
The timing, the team, the interaction between Lamar and his receivers, even though we had a small window of time in there, is not even close to the amount of time that they would have had. There was no OTAs. There were no mini camps. Training camp was totally different. We were dealing with something we had never seen before with the pandemic. So how they went about business. So when you come into the season and you're like, hey, the offense isn't on rhythm and I don't see the chemistry, it's kind of like, duh. You know what I mean? That might happen with a young quarterback and a young receiving core. And so this week can be exponentially, important as far as seeing it get better, because a lot of time, all these guys know how to play, but sometimes you just need to know, like, hey, when this guy's running his route, I need to kind of move like this. I need to take this amount of time in my drop. This is where he likes the ball. And sometimes you just need a reset to have those conversations, and the coaches can have a little bit of time without the pressure of game planning to kind of look and say, hey, this is where we need to try and get Hollywood open. This is where we need to try and get Boykin the ball. Maybe Duvernay can do this. Maybe let's get Prochet here. So this is a great time to be 5-1. Offense not where you want it to be, but these guys can work on some chemistry together, learning who likes what, and the coaches can also see where can we put these guys in the best position to be successful.
Absolutely.
Nice. Yeah. I'm excited to see what kind of work they get done during the bye week. But we asked a couple of our patrons, Josh, to send a couple questions in that they had for you, because it's a hot topic. Everyone wants to hear about Lamar. So I'm gonna pass on a couple of the questions for you to you. Charles asked, how much does Lamar pay attention to what the press says, and how much do you think anything that they say affects him and how he plays?
Great question. Okay, so he does not pay that much attention to what the press says, but he is, what are they, millennials? So he's always on his phone. You know what I mean? He's always on Instagram and all that. If you ever see Lamar, this is how he's going to look, right? Because he's just looking down at that phone. So he sees the stuff. You know what I mean? He sees it. So what I would say is, does he see it? Most stuff, sure. As far as the press, like he's not reading articles, you know what I mean, about himself, but if somebody's going to put up a meme or something on Instagram or he's probably seeing that. And what he then does, like anybody, he's a competitor. So it fuels the fire. And I'm going to say this, he's supremely confident. You know what I mean? As you've heard before, when people are like, who do you want to be like? Nobody. I want to be like myself. He really means that. Like he's very confident. So I wouldn't say that he has rabbit ears at all. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, oh, you think that? Okay, I'm going to show you on Sunday what I can do. So he's very much a person that's fueled by doubt. So he doesn't go looking for the stuff. He does see it. I know he sees it when it's on Instagram and all that. And he just adds it to the fuel when he goes out there on Sunday.
Nice. Well, I'm sure Charles is happy to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. He's making deposits, right? He's at the bank. Exactly. Just making deposits, man.
Yes.
Well, another question from yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, another question from a patron. This time it's from Tony. He asks, have you seen any changes in Lamar's mechanics, whether that's his footwork or whether that's how he chooses to use different arm angles to avoid batted down balls and other stuff that he can help that he could work on and clean up during the bye week?
That's a good question. I would say, and he knows I feel this way. I personally feel like he's gotten too in love with the sidearm, right? But he's very accurate with it. You know what I mean? He is accurate with it. I think to Tony's question, all quarterbacks need to constantly be cleaning up their mechanics. Those fundamentals have to be tuned up at all times. It's like an expensive foreign car. You know what I mean? Most of us can afford the foreign car, but we got to be able to afford the maintenance. You know what I mean? You got to make sure you get the tune up, the oil change, all that stuff, get them tires rotated. So, and that's a quarterback. Quarterback's a Lamborghini, baby. You got to get that thing in the shop and get it taken care of. So, got to stay on the fundamentals. And so he's doing that this week. We'll talk and clean that up, but that's got to be constant.
Yeah, it's funny you said, because I'm sorry, Jim. I just remember I remember Tom Brady when he did the match a couple months ago with Peyton Manning, and I think it was Phil Mickelson said that. He said, "You're not going to believe this, Tom Brady. Not only is he out there playing this charity golf, but he's in the parking lot running wind sprints and working on throwing fundamentals. And he's in year 27, 30. I mean, so yeah, I think that's a good point that every quarterback, even the GOAT, Tom Brady, has to continue to work on those fundamentals."
And let me say this before, I know Jim's got a question, but I talked to Tom House, Tom Brady's quarterback coach, longtime quarterback coach, and he said, Tom Brady is my most insecure quarterback. He's always like, is this right? Wow. Is this right? You know what I mean? Did I do this right? He said he's the most insecure of all of them when it comes to his fundamentals. So think of that mindset. The greatest quarterback ever is constantly like, did I get my arm here? Did I do this right? And so forth.
That's awesome. I'll tell you what, I think it's funny that people are asking questions or that are observing Lamar using the sidearm. To me, I was always taught, you're talking about a fancy car. I was always taught that a car is to get you from point A to point B. I don't care how that ball gets from point A to point B. As long as it gets there, it can be underhand for all I care.
And Jim, to your point, and this is what I hope people start to understand about Lamar. That is his mindset as far as fundamental mechanics, as far as game statistics. As long as we get to where we want to get the W, that's where he's at. So when people ask, hey, Lamar, should you be running more? Did we win? You know what I mean? Lamar, should you run less? Did we win? Hey, Lamar, should you throw with the sidearm? Did we win? Was it a completed pass? That's his mindset. It's like, listen, whatever I can do to get this done is what I'm going to do. He's not a person who's like, I got to do it this way. It's just, I got to get it done.
All right. That's so awesome to me. I love that mentality because, that brings, I think, us as fans a lot of hope that it's not a lot of, I always talk about with Glenn in basketball, there's a lot of guys that are empty calorie guys. They'll get stats, but their team is terrible. So, I'm glad that Lamar doesn't have that personality and that mindset. Now, one of the questions I had for you, and the other thing I thought was interesting, if you bear with me here for a second, I thought it was funny because today I was watching the presser with Coach Urban, and he kind of gave a dig to the media because people were asking about the sidearm thing, and he was like, "Well, some other quarterbacks do sidearm stuff, and you guys praise him." I think we know who he was talking about there, but and then all of a sudden Lamar does it and you're like, tisk tisk, and it's, so I think it's funny the way that everyone is treated differently in the media. But one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, in the off season, the focus in training camp was downfield passing outside the numbers, what, everybody's hot buttons were this year. The Ravens aren't hitting those deep passes right now consistently this season like they were last. And I think, that's impacting the way teams are defending the offense. What can Lamar do in your mind to help get the deep passing game back on track?
I think number one, he has to be fundamentally consistent with the deep ball. He's got to make sure that he's throwing that deep ball the same way every time so that his receivers can have a certain type of trust and understanding of what the ball is going to look like. And then they also, in this time period like we have now, this bye period, this is where you need to understand, hey, this is how fast so-and-so runs. This is how fast he runs. He likes the ball on the outside, the inside shoulder. Like, those are some things that they need to kind of really get together to get that deep ball on track. I would say the deep ball game is like a relationship. You know what I mean? It takes communication. It's constant. It's, that deep ball, you can't ignore the other partner in this. It's going to go south real bad. So you got to spend some quality time, some TLC, right? You didn't know Coach has to give you a little relationship advice too, all right?
That's awesome. Now, one thing I do want to ask about the deep ball, do you ever tell Lamar, 9 times out of 10, he's got a guy like Hollywood out there, Marquise Brown, who's going to be the fastest guy between him and the corner, and most times, do you ever tell him, like, hey, if you don't know exactly where to put it, look, just try and out throw him, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you just try and out throw him because he's going to run it down most of the time. If you're a little nervous, don't be worried about putting it too far more than you are about putting it too short. Do those conversations happen, or is that just me, just trying to pontificate about something that doesn't actually happen?
We talk about the deep ball, but as far as what you just said, no, because he sometimes throws it out in practice too far for Marquise. And Marquise is like, hey, bro, you know what I mean? So he's like, and you'll see Marquise be on his horse to go get it. So it's kind of one of those things where I think they were getting it together in the offseason. But, when the lights come on, it's a lot different, and then it's the juices flowing, adrenaline. So I really think there's still a point in time where they really do still need to figure out, okay, in game, this is what I need from Mark. This is what I need to get it to Marquise and so forth. I still think this is just the beginning of a relationship still grooming and budding, and they're figuring each other out.
Got ya. Awesome. Well, Glenn, do you have a follow-up there?
Go ahead, Jimmy. I'm sorry. My connection's a little in and out. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that maybe old Joe Flacco and Torrey Smith could come out there and give him a couple pointers on how to work the deep ball in M&T Bank. But I think that Marquise and Lamar will work it out just fine. I totally agree with you. Both young guys, obviously friends, have a lot of natural chemistry as people. So I'm excited. But Josh, we appreciate your insight. I know our viewers really like it. And look forward to it every time we announce that you're coming on the show. Thanks for your time. Why don't you let us know what you're working on, if people want to follow you, where they can find you, things like that.
I don't even know my Twitter name, but it's something. I'm working with quarterbacks. Super 8. We still have our program Sundays in Pompano Beach, teaching the young people for free. working with the FIU football team as their chaplain, and also getting with some guys on a new organization called QB Legacy. The guys who train Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, some other guys, Donovan McNabb's involved, trainer Kelly Bryant, and a lot of guys in South Carolina. We're hooking up, trying to put something together. So look out for that, QB Legacy, Super 8, and those things. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Good luck with everything, and we appreciate your time. Have a good one.
All right, you too, fellas.